Started with a salad. That's the part that should terrify you. Not a snake bite, not a dark alley, not some exotic disease you'd need a passport to catch. A salad. You ate lunch 4 days ago, felt fine, went back to work, forgot about it entirely. And right now, on the inner wall of your small intestine, in a warm, wet stretch of tissue about the width of a garden hose, a microscopic parasite has moved into your cells and started a family. You feel nothing yet. You will. And by the time you do, there will be somewhere between 40,000 and 400,000 of these things living inside the lining of your gut, and every single one of them will have entered your body riding on a piece of fruit you rinsed under the tap and assumed was clean. Rinsing, by the way, does almost nothing, and the reason it does nothing is one of the more insulting facts in all of parasitology. The thing hijacking your intestine is called Cyclospora cayetanensis. It's a single-celled organism, so small that thousands of them could line up across the surface of a dime, and it belongs to a family of parasites that only wants one thing from you, your intestinal cells, as a place to reproduce. Now, Hollywood has trained you to picture a parasite as something with a face, something in a jump scare. The movies love a good worm. That alien chestburster moment, the wriggling horror pulled out of somebody's leg on a medical drama. Cyclospora is nothing like that. It has no strategy, no malice, no menacing soundtrack. It is smaller than the period at the end of a sentence, and it will bring a grown adult to their knees using nothing but arithmetic and bad plumbing. So let's go back to the moment you swallowed it. When you eat a contaminated raspberry, or a leaf of iceberg lettuce, or a sprig of cilantro, you're not swallowing the active parasite. You're swallowing something called an oocyst. Think of it as a seed, a tiny armored capsule with the organism sealed inside, waiting. That capsule is chlorine resistant. And here's the insult. Washing your produce, even with treated water, does not reliably kill it. The shell is built to survive exactly that. It rides through your stomach acid unbothered, and when it reaches the warm, nutrient-rich environment of your small intestine, it does what a seed does in spring. It opens. Out come the moving forms of the parasite, and they immediately go looking for a home. That home is your enterocytes. These are the cells that line your small intestine. Billions of them, packed shoulder to shoulder, and they are quietly one of the most important surfaces in your entire body. Your small intestine isn't smooth inside. It's carpeted in millions of microscopic finger-like projections called villi, and each of those fingers is covered in even smaller bristles. Picture a shag rug made of living tissue. The entire point of that shag carpet design is surface area. Unfolded and laid flat, the lining of your small intestine would cover something close to the area of a tennis court, all of it dedicated to one job, pulling water and nutrients out of your food and into your blood. That is where you actually absorb your life. Every calorie, every sip of water you keep, passes through that carpet, and Cyclospora climbs inside the individual fibers of it. The parasite invades an enterocyte, settles into the upper portion of the cell, and begins to replicate. One becomes many. Those break out, invade neighboring cells, and repeat. For about a week, you have no idea any of this is happening. This is the incubation period, and it's usually around 7 days. Long enough that when the symptoms finally hit, you've completely forgotten about the lunch that caused them. You'll blame something you ate last night. You'll be wrong by a week, then the carpet starts to die. As the parasites reproduce inside your enterocytes, they damage and destroy them, and the villi, those absorbent fingers, they begin to flatten and blunt. Pathologists have a clinical name for this: villus atrophy. Atrophy just means wasting away, shrinking from lack of use or from damage. Your beautiful tennis court shag rug is being mowed down to a putting green. And here is where the arithmetic turns on you, because a flattened intestinal lining cannot do its one job. It cannot absorb water. Think about what that means. Every day your gut handles an enormous amount of fluid, not just what you drink, but liters of digestive juices. Your own body pours in to break down food. Normally, that carpet reclaims almost all of it, pulling the water back into your bloodstream before it ever reaches your colon. That reabsorption is what turns liquid slurry into something solid on the way out. When the villi are destroyed, that reabsorption fails. All that water, which should have gone back into you, keeps moving downstream instead, straight into your large intestine, which was never built to handle that kind of volume. And it doesn't stop there. The carbohydrates you ate, which the damaged lining can no longer absorb either, arrive in your colon undigested, where the resident bacteria treat them like a buffet and ferment them, producing gas. A large volume of unabsorbed water, plus a large volume of newly generated gas, arriving together in a space that has run out of patience. This is the symptom that made Cyclospora infamous, and I'm going to describe it the way the doctors do, clinically, because the clinical description is bad enough on its own. Emergency room physicians in the middle of recent U.S. outbreaks have said, flatly, that this isn't subtle. Patients cannot get through a conversation without having to leave the room. The bowel movements are watery, urgent, and come in a volume and force that the medical literature politely files under the word explosive. What you're feeling in your body is a deep, cramping pressure that builds and does not negotiate, a signal from a section of your gut that has completely lost control of its fluid balance. It empties. You feel a moment of relief, and then it builds again and again. Some patients report going more than 10 times a day. This is your tennis court, drained onto the floor. But the diarrhea, brutal as it is not actually the symptom survivors remember most. It was the stomach cramps, a deep, persistent gnawing pain that lingered long after everything else had faded, combined with a fatigue so heavy it flattened him, and an appetite that simply switched off. And that fatigue is not laziness, and it's not just dehydration, it's starvation in slow motion. Your intestine, the organ responsible for extracting fuel from food, has partially stopped working. You are eating and getting nothing back. Your body is running on a battery it can no longer recharge. People lose weight fast, several pounds in days, not because they aren't eating, but because their gut has quietly resigned from its job. Now, stack on the fluid loss. Every one of those explosive episodes takes water and electrolytes with it. Sodium, potassium, the dissolved salts your nervous system and your heart use to send electrical signals. As those drain away, you get lightheaded. Your mouth goes dry and stays dry. Your heart rate climbs because with less fluid in circulation, it has to beat faster to move what's left. In the recent American outbreaks, patients weren't dying, but a meaningful fraction were sick enough to be hospitalized, hooked to intravenous lines, sometimes 2 at once, because they could not drink fast enough to replace what they were losing. Your body is trying to bail out a boat with a bucket, while the parasite quietly widens the hole. And then, just when you think the worst is behind you, Cyclospora plays its cruelest card. You start to feel better. The diarrhea eases. You think, finally, it's over. It is not over. This infection is famous for a remitting relapsing course, which means it retreats and then comes back, sometimes more than once. That false recovery, that little window of hope where you cancel your plans to feel sorry for yourself and start making plans again, is a feature of the disease. The parasites are still in the walls of your gut, still cycling through their reproductive stages, and a few days later the whole thing returns. Untreated, this can drag on for weeks. In documented cases, more than a month. Now, here is the honest part. For a healthy adult, Cyclospora is very rarely the thing that actually kills you. It is not on the same tier as the diseases that shut your brain stem down in a week. In a healthy body, given enough time, your immune system usually grinds it out and the villi, that carpet, slowly regrow. And what makes it dangerous is who's standing next to you when it hits. In someone whose immune system is weakened, a transplant patient on immune-suppressing drugs, someone with advanced illness, the very old, the very young, Cyclospora does not politely leave. There are documented cases of it settling into a transplant patient's gut for 5 months, causing relentless diarrhea and weight loss so severe that doctors first mistook the damaged, flattened intestinal lining for an entirely different disease. For those patients, the slow drain of malabsorption and dehydration is not an inconvenience. It's a genuine threat. And for a small child in a part of the world without clean water or IV fluids, that same drain is one of the oldest killers there is. The parasite doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs the plumbing to fail long enough. Which brings us to a raspberry and one of the strangest food scares in American history. Spring of 1996. Across the United States and Canada, people started getting violently, mysteriously sick. More than 1,400 confirmed cases, laid out flat by a parasite most doctors had never even heard of. Investigators scrambled to find the source, and their first suspect was California strawberries. It was the wrong suspect. Growers in California watched their reputation and tens of millions of dollars evaporate over a berry that turned out to be innocent. The real culprit was traced eventually to fresh raspberries, imported from Guatemala, where the parasite had contaminated the crop somewhere along the water supply. No one died in that outbreak. But it rewrote how America thinks about the produce aisle because it proved that the most wholesome thing on your plate, fresh fruit, the stuff your doctor keeps telling you to eat more of, could deliver a microscopic passenger straight from a farm thousands of miles away, and that no amount of rinsing at your kitchen sink would stop it. And if you think that's ancient history, it isn't. As of the summer of 2026, the United States is in the middle of one of the largest Cyclospora surges on record. Over 11,000 confirmed or probable cases across dozens of states, hundreds hospitalized, in a year when the country usually sees around 3,000. The outbreaks keep getting traced back to the same familiar suspects. Imported fresh produce, leafy greens, herbs, the lettuce on a fast food taco. The parasite hasn't gotten smarter. Our salad, apparently, has just gotten more global. So here's how you actually survive this one, because the good news is that survival is very much on the table. The single most important thing is to not let the plumbing win. The mechanism that hurts you is fluid loss, so your entire job is to stay ahead of it. This is not the moment for plain water alone. Plain water doesn't replace the salts you're losing, and in large amounts can actually make things worse. What you want is an oral rehydration solution, the specific balance of water, salt, and sugar that your gut can still absorb, even when it's damaged. That formula is one of the great quiet achievements of modern medicine, and it's sitting on a shelf at every pharmacy for a couple of dollars. Sip it steadily. If you cannot keep fluids down, or you're getting dizzy, or the color of your urine is heading toward the color of your coffee, that is your signal to stop toughing it out and get to a doctor for an IV. There's no medal for dehydrating yourself into a hospital bed you could have avoided. The second thing is to actually get diagnosed, and this is where Cyclospora is sneaky, because a routine stool test usually misses it completely. The standard lab panel isn't looking for this particular parasite, unless someone specifically asks it to. So the words you want to say to your doctor are simple. Could this be Cyclospora? And can you test for it specifically? Because once it's correctly identified, this thing has a genuine weakness. A common, decades-old antibiotic combination, trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, the same kind of drug used for ordinary bladder infections, clears it reliably. A parasite that can flatten your intestines and drain you for a month is undone by a prescription that costs less than lunch. It just has to be the right prescription, and someone has to think to write it. So the thing that beats you here was never really the parasite. It was the assumption. The assumption that clean-looking food is clean food, that a quick rinse is protection, that feeling better means being better, that the standard test looked for everything. Cyclospora survives on that arithmetic. And subscribe.